region. Joining us now is Juan Sartori. He is Chief Executive Officer, and he is joining us in studio from Union Group. Good to meet you and have you here. Well, first of all, okay, all eyes around the world will be glued to South America and Latin America as the World Cup gets set to kick off later on this week. With billions in infrastructure money pouring in, is there still time to get invested in this region? Joining us now is Juan Sartori. He is Chief Executive Officer, and he is joining us in studio from Union Group. Good to meet you and have you here. Well, first of all, just tell us about the excitement surrounding these games, I guess even in the investment community.
Yeah, well, Paula, Paul, good morning. I just landed a couple hours ago from Uruguay, and I can tell you in our country, the only thing we talk about is not business, it's not markets, it's the World Cup. This is our main preoccupation. It's starting in a couple of days.
Is that good or bad for markets and for market participants?
I think it depends whether we make a good World Cup or a bad World Cup, and the same for every single country. That's going to determine the mood and probably even investment opportunities.
A lot of people look at the Bovespa in Brazil as a benchmark for Latin American markets. It's down, significantly down from its multi-year highs. Why don't we start with Brazil, that economy and that stock market? What do you think?
Absolutely. Brazil is the biggest market in our continent. It's the leading market, but it's also a very different one than the rest of Latin America. You know, it's a giant, has a lot of size, a lot of capacity, but it's also slower and it has its own structural issues. So we have seen over the last 7-8 years a much stronger growth in the rest of Latin America than we have seen in Brazil, and we expect that to continue. Actually, as Brazil was not doing great, places like Peru, Colombia, Chile, Uruguay have been growing at 7, 8, 9% GDP. These are the countries we focus on as Union Group, and is where we think are the most interesting opportunities today.
So tell us about some of the opportunities, and let's go through some of the countries. Certainly Colombia has been a country of turnaround status, essentially, in the last 10 years or so. What are its markets like? What's investable in Colombia? What industries? Mining, I'm assuming one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. These countries have a huge amount of resources still to be developed. And as they get developed, that creates an infrastructure opportunity. We see the same in places like Peru or places like Paraguay, you know, a very early stage resources story trickling into an infrastructure, into a retail and commercial story. So Colombia, probably infrastructure, probably power generation, probably retail opportunities as GDP slows down from 8-9% to 4%, but it's much more sustainable in the long term.
Is Colombia politically stable? Is it stable in terms of the long-running war with drug terrorists in Colombia? That may be an old story, but I think it's an image that persists in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. We have elections this weekend in Colombia. I think whatever the result, the stability is assured. Whatever the results, the process of peace in Colombia is well advanced, and we expect it to finish. And the same across most of the countries over there. You know, you have a little bit of a different situation in Venezuela, in Argentina, in Bolivia. But if you look a little bit longer term, the opportunity of these countries in terms of development is gigantic. You know, Venezuela is the biggest oil reserves in the world. Argentina has the biggest shale reserves in the world. Bolivia, the biggest lithium reserves. So as soon as these countries start turning around, you want to be also investing there. So it's countries that we look and we watch, even though today maybe the political situation is not the best.
What about Mexico? Mexico has put through a ton of reforms. I mean, really turned things on its head recently. That causes a bit of pain at the beginning, but ultimately people are very optimistic on Mexico's economic prospects.
Yeah, I think it's the big change of Latin America compared with other cycles. We used to have very good times, spend the money, and then be crying at the end of the cycles. I think we learned from that in the past, and what you see in Mexico, what you see in Peru, what you see in all these countries is very strong reforms, the high levels of foreign reserves that allows us to reinvest, to have counter-cyclical measures, and create a more sustainable economic growth. And you definitely see that in Mexico.
How do you think North American investors should invest in Latin American equities if they want to? There are exchange-traded funds that give exposure to some of these countries. There are probably exchange-traded funds in the U.S. that give continent-wide exposure. What do you think is the way to do it?
Well, it's one of the big problems. You know, stock exchanges are relatively undeveloped. You go into most of these countries, and particularly the most interesting opportunities do not have listed investment products or easy ways to access it. It's one of the reasons why I'm here in Canada today. To this afternoon we have the shareholder meeting of Dundee Corporation. It's our strategic shareholder. One of the big things we're going to discuss and we're going to launch is new investment products in order to target these Latin American economies in the best way.
I mean, through mining, through infrastructure, through what avenues?
Resources, can be agriculture, can be mining, can be oil, the associated infrastructure, but also later cycle investments like real estate or retail or commercial properties.
And these are likely to be funds offered by Dundee. Is that what we're expecting?
We're going to be creating the products today. One of the things is you want to be able to operate through cycles, take advantage of cycles, and not suffer from them. So probably closed-end products are the most attractive one. Allows us to have a long-term view. When we created this partnership, we had a very similar value. Ned Goodman, the CEO of Dundee, told me once, Juan, if you can, never sell anything. Buy good assets, operate them, and never sell them. So the philosophy is going to be something similar to that. Buy good assets, operate them with our teams on the ground, and try to develop them and take advantage of the strong growth these economies are going to have in the next 5 to 10 years.
If my World Cup history is correct, the last time Brazil hosted the World Cup was 1950, and Uruguay broke the hearts of every Brazilian by actually winning that final game late in the game. Who's going to win the World Cup this time around?
I hope we're going to repeat that legendary moment, and we'll be there in the final in Maracanã against Brazil. So it's going to be an exciting time because of the teams and because of the history involved there. Brazilians, I think, are more scared of Uruguay in final than whether the Bovespa is up or down over the last 3 months.
Okay, well, viva Uruguay. Thank you, Juan. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
That's Juan Sartori. He is Chief Executive Officer at Union Group and joined us here in the studio.